Now, one of the things I want to start with, friends, is that this is normal, this is natural, this is in fact the way very healthy systems behave. Would you stop trying to fix it? We need to learn that that's exactly the way congregations behave. That's exactly the way that all organizations behave. It isn't because people are afraid of change, it's because people resist loss. James Hillman, the psychologist, talks about the fact that growth is always loss. Anytime you're going to grow, he says, anytime you're going to grow, you're going to lose something. And what you lose is the comfort of knowing how you used to do it. So it doesn't matter how healthy the change is, it will be resisted as the first and the natural response. William Bridges talks about the fact that in all transitions, in all change, there are three stages. The first stage is letting go. In order for you to take something new up, you have to let go of the old. The second stage is the confusion of the in-between time when you're not sure of how it works. You've let go of the old that you did know how it works. You don't know how the new works yet, and so you're in this state of confusion. And the third stage is beginning new, where you actually get started on this new thing, whatever you're going to do. Okay? Now, one of the things that really is important about that is that Bridges says very clearly that given those three stages of change, everybody very naturally wants to start with stage 3. We don't want to do the letting go because letting go is painful. There's a lot of hard work there. It hurts to have to let go because that's when we really do sense all of our losses. We have to let go of the stuff that was known and that was comfortable. And we certainly don't want to admit that there's a confused in-between time because that's a hard place to live, and so we want to start new. And so lots of times, leadership is all about trying to find this new thing. We just identify the new thing, thinking that it's okay. We've been set aside as a planning task force. Planning task force is supposed to take a look at the church, look at the community, come up with new ideas about what we're supposed to do. Here it is. And then suddenly everybody says, no, I don't want to do that. It's very natural, friends. Take a look at your roller coaster of change. Do you notice on the left-hand side, your curve first goes up? Now, if you were to take a line and go straight through that diagram from top to bottom in the middle, what you would find is an energy scale. In change, we always go from high energy to low energy. On the left-hand side, what you're going to find is we're going to go from high to low energy on the negative scale. On the right-hand side of that scale, you're going to go from low to high on the positive scale. But one of the things that we know about change is that the energy in the system itself changes. As soon as we announce that there's going to be a change, the energy goes up. Everybody gets interested. We're going to have a capital fund campaign. Oh, great. What's the goal? What's the picture? Show me the architecture. We're going to call a new pastor. Oh, great. Time. Even if it's bad news in our own lives, think about that. Even if we've been given bad news in our lives, you've got a serious illness, you get a diagnosis, great. Now I know what I'm dealing with. My energy goes up. But then what happens in all change is that you go down through all of those emotions of letting go. And you go from the high energy emotions such as anger, frustration, worry, all the way down to the low energy kind of feelings that have to do with aloneness, have to deal with separation, have to deal with depression. How many of you have been in a congregation when you had to make a very difficult decision after a long conversation and realized just at the point where you have to make the decision, people start to stay away from the meeting? Have you been there? It's simply that's where you are on the scale. It's only after people decide whether they're going to be in it or out it, the fight-flight switch. Here is a significant change my congregation has to go through, and as a leader I have to decide, am I in this, am I out it, am I going to work with it, am I going to leave it? Once you make that decision, you start to work your way up through that confusion of the in-between time and put some structure to it. And you begin to talk about hope, you begin to talk about possibility, you begin to talk about some things that you could change in terms of your practice. One of the things that I want you to see as leaders, friends, is that on this roller coaster of change, leaders always precede members on the roller coaster. leaders who have to do all of the work of trying to figure out where is this congregation, what's going on, what are our possibilities. You have already gone through the roller coaster of change because of the conversations you've been having. And so you decide you're going to stay with it. You're working your way up. You come up with a strategic plan, and you take it back to the board that says what? No, thank you. Because they're still over on the left side. Leadership precedes membership. And so it's not unusual at all for the leaders to find themselves called to a leadership task by the very people who are later going to say that they're not willing to work with you on it. And you will feel betrayed because you are in a different spot on the roller coaster of change than they are. Remember I talked about problem solving and how we're all trained in problem solving? This is where it really gets complicated. Because you're on the board and you've decided you're going to take a new, kind of a path in terms of the ministry of the church. You're on a planning team and you've really decided that here's some things that we're called to do. We have to start working on it. And people have said, well, oh boy, no, that feels uncomfortable. And so what do you and I do except we begin to get persuasive? We look at any resistance that we have to our leadership as if it's the new problem, and we begin to try to strategize about how we're going to compensate for that resistance. And so we talk louder and slower, as if that's going to make a difference. The dilemma is, if you look at that scale again, we're over on the right side working our way up, and on the right side are ideas. And on the left side are feelings. And too often, friends, when we're trying to help our congregation find a new way in, we find ourselves talking about the ideas at the very time that the rest of the people are talking about their feelings. Part of what we know in terms of the kind of leadership that we're talking about here to be able to move through the uncomfortable times of not knowing exactly where you're going is that we have to know when to practice a leadership of speaking, and we need to know when to practice the leadership of listening. On the right-hand side is the leadership of talking. On the left-hand side is the leadership of listening. You really want to help people through leadership challenges, to ask, who are we and what has God called us to do and who is our neighbor? Then once you get into the conversation, you need to be willing to listen to people's feelings. Leaders have to learn how to reach back, and they have to learn how to listen to what the people are feeling. Now, when I talk about that, listening to all those feelings on the left side, I don't know whether you recognize it. Some of you may have a person or two that likes to live permanently on that left side. Don't know if you've thought about that. We do not listen to people until everybody is happy. But we do need to listen to people until they've had a chance to talk about what they're feeling. And then we simply say, let's go. That's the part we're going to talk about tonight. How do we learn how to simply say, let's go? Because the more that you and I try to come up with directions for the future in which everybody's concerns are duly noted and cared for so that we're all happy to go, means that we will never take the trip. The part of leadership that we've been talking about today is courage. That in order to provide leadership over management takes courage, because leadership takes us into questions rather than answers. Whenever the leader is willing to move into a question, you have to be able to take the people with you, not knowing where you're going. Not knowing where you're going. This is the Exodus moment. It means being called to lead the people into the wilderness, not knowing if you can get out. And it takes courage. Let me just leave you with one of the stories from the Midrash. Our Jewish brothers and sisters have this wonderful way of telling us not what's in the text, but what's not in the text. And so the Midrash talks about the fact when the Israelites left Egypt, they came to the banks of the Red Sea, and the waters had not parted. And so all the tribal leaders sat down and argued about who had to go into the water first. I always tell people, I have been to that church meeting so many times. You know, the Egyptians are right behind you, and now you're going to, oh boy. And what the Midrash says is that they argued and argued and argued until one could take it no longer. His name was Nashon. They even have his name. And they said, taking it no longer, Nashon began to walk into the water. He walked into the water up to his ankles, and the water did not part. He walked in up to his knees, and the water did not part. He went up to his waist, up to his armpits, up to his neck, and the water did not part. He walked in until it was up to his nose, and with one more step, his nose would have gone under. And so as he took that step, the waters parted. Friends, that's what divergent leadership is all about. Okay, you feeling better now? You know, part of me wants to say, how much more interesting could it get? How blessed we are to be given that. And how often I lay awake at night worrying. And I hope you do too. Thank you.